Many people are attracted to philosophy because they have a profound craving to answer the deepest questions of human existence. Why are we here? What's the purpose of it all? What's it mean to live a good life? What is life and death? Does God exist? And so on and so forth, right? They're drawn to philosophy by the love of wisdom, which of course the word means. I want to present a very brief, concise case for why those who seek truth of that kind ought to seriously consider a mystical path, a path that leads beyond the mind. And very briefly, the argument is simply this. As far as we know, as far as we can tell, our instruments of knowledge as human beings are fallible. They're prone to error. The senses can make errors. Logic can make errors. And we are culture bound. And we are bound by our own limitations as biological beings. And in so many different ways, every conclusion we draw is subject to all kinds of doubt. And the entire history of philosophy in all cultures has proven this issue of continuous doubt. Now, there are some people who are perfectly happy with engaging in the process of refining and playing with different conclusions. But there are those, again, who are drawn by desire for absolute truth, who want more. And what is eminently clear is that the senses and the intellect, given our limitations as human beings, simply cannot provide that kind of absolute truth. They are too subject to uncertainty. So the mystical paths, which are not to be confused with simple blind belief in organized religion, but the mystical paths, which are cross-cultural and include, for example, the heart of mystical Hinduism, Vedanta, or the heart of Buddhism. I say the heart because each of these things have an organized religious aspect to them, but that's separable from the mystical aspect. And the mystical aspect is the path of individual investigation, individual contemplative inward investigation. Christianity has it, various indigenous traditions have it, right? There are many, many different kinds of mystical paths, right? But the commonality among them is the idea of profound inward investigation into one's own experience. It's not about simply blindly believing. It's about engaging in a practice that opens up the possibility of a different instrument of knowing. The mind, the intellect, the senses are fallible, subject to doubt, subject to uncertainty. The mystical paths suggest there may be another instrument of knowing that is not subject to these sorts of doubts. Now, why would you believe this is a possibility? Well, I'll give two reasons, right? Neither of them are airtight because, of course, no reasons are airtight, right, as we've just been saying. One is this continuous gap that exists between the fact of our conscious experience and any possible explanation of such experience, right? This is the so-called hard problem of consciousness. I mean, it's called so many different things. But essentially, there's the gap between our subjective awareness of things and our ability to put that into words, to explain it in terms of biology or science, to explain it at all. There is a kind of private sphere of our own experience, arguably, that is immune not just now, but forever, from being fully publicly explained. And of course, there are some people who won't buy that, who think that it's all going to be explained someday. And if that satisfies you, fine. But there are some people who know intuitively that that isn't correct. And they've read the arguments and they agree that there is this mystery of consciousness and that there's something inherently mysterious about it. And this is, not coincidentally, the focus of the world's mystical paths, is that mystery of our own awareness or consciousness. The other reason to consider the mystical path as a seeker of truth is that these paths are cross-cultural, and across time you have lineages of people who report that they have been able to access some kind of extramental truth. And it's perfectly compatible, this truth, with the truths of science or other kinds of truths in other domains, right? This is not talking about psychic abilities or supernatural miracles. I mean, those may be incidentally part of various discourses, but the real point is there are people for thousands of years across the world, in different traditions, who have talked about some kind of access to extramental truth. So if you are willing to give some credence to that long tradition and notice this conceptually profound mystery of consciousness and see how these two are connected, then it might make sense as a seeker of profound truth, as a real philosopher, to consider some of these other paths to truth. The real path of philosophy may be to go through the mind to something beyond it. Again, it's not about a blind belief in God or a particular conception of God, although it could be compatible with God. It is about the possibility of an inner investigation that leads to a different kind of knowing, a knowing that is not subject to the same sorts of doubts that typical quote-unquote rational philosophical investigation is subject to. And that's the rational philosophical case for seekers of truth pursuing a mystical path.